So, of course, I did receive a few more questions today. Which I'll attempt to, still address in an arc, but it's good to leave unfinished business, right? So there is a shape to how I'd like to close this portion of the retreat. And so leaving aside a little of the multifaceted energy we've been doing these last days. So as it said, the end is in the beginning, and the beginning will take us forward to the next stage of all our lives, practice. And so, of course, the place to focus now is bodhicitta. What is this aspiration, this wish, this longing of our hearts? And there are 2 points that have struck me very clearly, especially this morning, in response to questions that so often come up in us. If there are countless Buddhas already, the great bodhisattvas, the pure levels, Manjushri, Avalokiteshvara, and so on, and they're already taking care of all worlds, all beings, then why do I have to do it? Has that ever come up as a little niggling question for anybody? Because some of the classical teachings on developing bodhicitta through recalling our mother's kindness, is answering that question from the point of view really of personal debt, the personal responsibility and connection that we bear with every living being. But I think it's admitted that that's quite a difficult way for those of us who maybe have not been raised thinking of our existence as in terms of past and future lives. We may have cultivated that faith, that conviction based on reasoning that past and future lives exist. But when it hasn't been inculcated from the beginning that one's looking upon current interactions in terms of past interactions, it can be hard to get the taste of looking into someone's eyes and saying, "You were my mother a millennia ago." So I think sometimes it can be useful for us to address this from the totally present moment experience, and that present moment experience then can expand to infinity. And so I like to address it from the point of view of emptiness, and as Lama Alan referred to very recently, this notion that each of us is the center of our own mandala. That can make sense if we're thinking in terms of, okay, well, substrate consciousness and all the appearances as they appear to me are relative to my individual stream of a substrate consciousness. But there's more to it than that. We are also the center of our own mandala emerging from pristine awareness. And when we begin to tap into that dimension of our being, the question I stated a moment earlier utterly dissolves. Because if we could start to look at every living being from the perspective of the ground, which is not one or many, the ground which manifests, emerges as every single one of us, then our promise is not a duality. Our promise is not an I-thou promise in the same way. Conventionally speaking, it has to be. We have to engage with one another as other, and therefore if we generate compassion and the aspiration to actually do something about the suffering we see, of course that has a duality to it, and that's fine at the conventional level. But the deeper we penetrate from within to the ground that is neither one nor many, across all existence. Then the responsibility that we bear is the exact same responsibility as every Buddha there ever has been, is, or will be. As I've heard Lama Alan teach many times, if we try to generate or make the bodhisattva promise from the perspective of our coarse mind, it's actually nonsense. Because if we're identifying the I who vows as just this limited person, what can we do? We faced that already. We faced our helplessness in the face of global climate change, tragic political situations, human rights disasters, poverty, and so on, disease. So this little person can speak the words of bodhicitta, but if we're identifying with this level, it doesn't make sense. And at the relative level of the substrate consciousness, if we think, well, that's always been here and it'll go on as long as I'm a sentient being, so I can make a promise from my substrate consciousness that will go from lifetime to lifetime. It's said that the bodhisattva vow, once you take it, you have it until enlightenment, as long as you don't break it or thoroughly degenerate in the precepts associated with that vow. It's forever. So, yes, conventionally speaking, one has to say that the imprints of the bodhisattva vow travel in our substrate consciousness, or as I deconstructed that phrase a little bit before, it is an imprint associated with our substrate consciousness. But we don't make the vow from our substrate consciousness, because an individual stream can't save everybody either. How can one substrate consciousness get inside the substrate consciousness of another being and plant the little seeds there so that that person will develop great compassion in the next lifetime? It's not a one-to-one kind of relationship. But if we can dare to view those who appear to us now as other from the perspective of the pristine awareness that is their ground, their heart, the indestructible bindu within every person we meet, then the I who vows is the same I that is at the core of each one of us. So the bodhisattva vow is transforming us all together. And someone did ask me today about how we can take our practice of settling the mind in its natural state, for example, into daily life. And for now, I would suggest, when we engage with others, as much as we can recall the stillness at our core, the relative stillness, the ultimate stillness, and attend to, in all the senses of attend, the Buddha nature within each person we encounter, and not as an abstraction. The deeper we go in our own practice, the more we taste it. I hesitate whether to say this, but it came to mind so vividly. A number of years ago, I don't remember exactly which year it was now, but at least 7 years ago, I came out of a retreat in Colorado, actually very close to where I am now, in retreat, and was in Denver airport. And my flight had been canceled, so I knew I was going to have to spend the night at Denver airport or nearby. But I remember the vividness of looking at somebody waiting for a bus. You know the kind of situation I'm talking about. Just like, okay, we're waiting, everybody's frustrated, everybody's tired, everybody's trying to get somewhere. So mundane. And kind of jaw-droppingly looking at total stranger who couldn't see me at the time. And that feeling of, do you know? Do you know you're a manifestation of extremely subtle energies which are of the nature of primordial consciousness. So it would be nice when you see strangers, when you see pretty people, ugly people, happy people, sad people, depressed people. Do you know? Do you know who you are? Do you know the vibration of divine energy that's allowing you to even have limbs, to even have senses? And I think when we're dwelling in that kind of place, it will be evidently clear to us how to act in the most compassionate, most meaningful, most loving way with people according to what's appropriate in the interaction. And sometimes it's just looking from afar and seeing that ray of light from our heart entering that being's heart. And knowing that it's not a me who wants to save you, it's not a me who wants to take away your troubles and give you my happiness. These are very, very important practices. But if they're grounded in the knowledge that there is a ray of pristine awareness arising as this person, and a ray of pristine awareness arising as this person, then my love for you is unfathomable. And so from the perspective of the middle way view of emptiness, we know very well that we are limited right now to only seeing the world according to the propensities that we carry with us. And that is completely configuring the kinds of appearances we're able to see, and it utterly blocks out the appearances we can't see. But once we realize that the appearances that come to us and the even relative nature of matter, speaking of molecules being in the stage and so on, it's closed to us, and we know philosophically that we'll never find a particular configuration that's the way matter really is. It's always measured from a particular perspective. And likewise, our reading of others' emotions, others' needs, others' sadness, others' pain is entirely colored by our own propensities. That's very basic Buddhist teaching, and in particular, middle way teaching. So from that point of view, we need to make the Bodhisattva vow at manifesting through the words and thoughts of a course mind, so that we can dedicate ourselves to a path, so that we can expand, infinitely expand, the range of what we can see, what appears to us. And only thus, as we saw in the quotations from Dzogchen, Atisha, only when we have clairvoyance can we start to see what others actually need. But it's possible that there are Buddhas and Bodhisattvas walking among us all the time that we just don't have the capacity to recognize yet. And that's because of the veils upon our own mind streams. And so, for that reason, and notice I'm giving you many reasons, for that reason we need to generate the Bodhisattva vow within ourselves, so that from our perspective, we see how every living being is following the path, is being purified. And there may be times when we realize that because each individual sentient being is not inherently a sentient being, we might see a Buddha even as they see someone who's suffering from their own perspective, their own limited perspective, which is still veiled by delusion. So, in vowing to help others, we're breaking through our own obscurations. That point, again, could be elaborated a great deal, but I need to just leave it as a seed for you now. And then, yet another point in terms of eudaimonia itself. We won't actually be happy until everyone is. We can think, oh, well, maybe there's such a thing as an individual liberation where I can find lasting happiness because a nirvana that has overcome the seeds of mental affliction, a meditation that can last indefinitely, I'll use that word, indefinitely dwelling in the bliss of nirvana. And there are different poetic ways, actually, in which the Mahayana Sutras say that even an arhat will be shaken from that meditation and, shall I say, encouraged or forced by the Buddhas to start all over again and generate the Bodhisattva vow. And I have no reason to doubt that at some level of reality, I can't really imagine right now, that kind of interaction could take place between the mind of a Buddha and the mind of an arhat. But just logically, I think we can taste that if our true nature, our ground, is pristine awareness, and any other sublime level of meditation realization is still just a shadow of that ultimate ground, then how could our true being ever be satisfied until the whole of reality was saved, was pure, had realized its own nature? And I use the word "it" here because you realize we're going totally transpersonal. But that sense of the wholeness in which enlightenment must take place. And even to fathom what the enlightenment of the Buddhas might be like relative to us, and if the Buddhas are emanating everywhere, why didn't somebody come help me sooner? I think to make sense of those questions, again, one has to go to the level of timelessness versus time. Our time itself is created by limited perceptions. As we know, time is not inherently existent, and that means subjectively, of course, it expands and contracts, but even from a point of view of quantum physics, time is a label, a imputation. So could there be a perspective from which the Buddhas see all of our enlightenment as a present moment reality? And from that perspective, joy is complete. The joy of the Buddhas is only complete when all manifestations of mind, of consciousness, of awareness are at peace, are fulfilled. You see, you get what I'm saying? It's that, the scope has to be that vast. And so if we can't imagine planets other than ours where there are other realms and other configurations of 6 realms, as is taught in classical Mahayana Buddhism, if that feels quite hard to get our minds around, just reach to the core of everything, and say, could fulfillment ever be complete until all are saved? No. Do I know at some level that that's who I am? I have to dwell at that ground. Then of course I take responsibility for everyone, because everyone is arising from the same ground that's me. And then the willingness to give ourselves away, as we did this morning, as we do when we serve others, very concrete ways. We give our time, we give our love, we give our compassion. Someday, at higher levels of actual bodhisattva, conventional level bodhisattva evolution, we'll be able to give away our limbs, give away our eyes, as we hear in the great stories. But it will be joy to give ourselves if we know that the me who's arising is simply meant as a gift. I was never anything else but a gift, arising from the ground, given to the level of all of us who need help, and then drawing us back to the ground. So we'll start our meditation very soon, but this will be an extension both of what we've been doing in these sessions with the Guru Yoga, but also the sublime meditation we began this morning in merging mind with space. And there is something I want to clarify just one step further. Because the question has come up again in these beautiful notes that you've given me, sort of the difference between awareness of awareness and open presence as an actual Dzogchen practice. And because this is not a Dzogchen retreat, we've not yet gone there, and that's entirely appropriate. But for those of you who've had any exposure to the practice of open presence or resting in pristine awareness, rigpa choksha, and wonder, well, why couldn't I do that instead of shamatha? As I understand it, the key difference is that shamatha requires the honing of our awareness into a single field. For any practice of shamatha, in the end, that has to be the field of mental consciousness. So that the senses can implode, so that the coarse minds can dissolve. And if introduced to open presence too soon, as we already saw the warning from Padmasambhava in Natural Liberation, if one's introduced to it as a main practice too soon, because the instruction of open presence is to keep the senses open and just be there. I'm not saying that's a complete instruction, but many people have received it as such. Then there is nothing to train our attention. Because if one's that open, then the attention will just keep scattering. And so, as Lama Alan has said so many times, if you're just sitting there with a coarse mind, you're not practicing open presence and you're not practicing shamatha either. So it's actually not, there may be great faith, there may be genuine motivation, but it's not progressing our minds on the path. So the key difference when practicing awareness of awareness, as we've learned this week, it may be the coarse mind that one is aware of. It's the awareness we all have, our everyday awareness. So one's not presuming that it's anything more than that, anything deeper than that. But by training the awareness to selectively screen out all other objects of attention and reaching shamatha in awareness of awareness, then that becomes the direct route, as it were, once one has the key of vipassana to drop into pristine awareness. And then the pristine awareness that rests in non-action, in not doing anything, with senses wide open, those senses, you're not engaging those senses in a dualistic way if you have actually penetrated into pristine awareness. The senses are not arising as human senses. It's pristine awareness gushing through the appearance of a human body and extending through infinite space and time. And then the human body has nothing left to do, so it rests. But what's happening in open presence is pristine awareness dwelling in pristine awareness. So with the discernment that can very honestly look at ourselves and say, what's happening in my meditation? If we can look and say, maybe I have an inkling of it, maybe I have an intuition of it, but I know that I'm still picking up sense objects in a dualistic fashion, in the sense that labels are just doing their normal thing, and the mind feels like it's distracted as it goes off to this, and then it goes off to that. Then we can't fool ourselves. Because the engagement of awareness with object is occurring business as usual. And it's shamatha that overcomes all the bad habits of attentional imbalance, so that the mind that's truly ready to rest in open presence just won't succumb to that for all the reasons you've heard. So that said, as we tasted yesterday evening where I took the Guru Yoga straight into a resting in stillness in the midst of the motion of our mind, through our devotion, we might be able to taste that place for very brief periods. And it's worth it to taste it. It's worth it to open the keyhole, peek in, and know, okay, my mind's not totally ready for that yet, but I know it's where I'm going. And in that spirit, let's meditate. Today, before anything else, find a taste of stillness at the center of your heart. Whatever the clearest sense of that stillness you've had so far this week, just tap into it. And let all the energies of your body fall away around that stillness. Dropping into gravity, as we've done before. Feeling the energies settle in your toes, in your legs, your fingertips. The lengthening in your spine. Relaxing any tension behind the eyes. And the jaw. And let your breath fall out of you. Still grounded in this stillness at your heart, and letting this settling of your body and speech already feel distant from that. Not exerting any control, but the vigilance already in place. Let your eyes open. Resting gently. Just dwelling in what it is to be awake, aware. And then leaving eyes open or closing them as you wish, draw your focus, your attention to this place at the center of your heart, the center of your spiritual being. And bring to mind someone for whom natural compassion arises, someone you know who's suffering right now, for whom you've been asked to pray. Maybe someone you don't know personally, but you've heard about. And just know that person is present in your heart. All their needs, their wish to be free of that suffering, their longing for happiness. Without visualizing, simply let that person be present with you. And then let another come to mind. With the specificity of their needs. And then someone else. Acknowledging all the different levels of relationship, close or far, you may have with these people, but focusing mainly on how they all equally want to be free of suffering, wish to be happy, each in their specific ways. And then, since it's present to us, you can turn your mind to the sounds of people outside and know the sounds we hear are just symbols representing people who are there with their own needs and desires. And so tuck them in your heart too. And then let at least one person come to mind whose behavior you find reprehensible. Perhaps someone it's very hard to love. And see the child in them. The simplicity of a person who faced circumstances in this life and became a certain way, but is not inherently that way, and could, with the right circumstances, manifest entirely different qualities, all from the same ground. Draw those beings into your heart as well. And then ask yourself, who can help them, who can relieve their pain, who can guide them to realize their true nature. All of them, equally. And so call upon your own refuge, manifest as a spiritual guide in the space in front of you. And as before, this could be a teacher you know, a teacher you've heard speak, or this could be a celestial bodhisattva such as Manjushri, Chenrezig, Tara. Knowing the fullness of all the Buddhas present in both the Buddha forms and the Bodhisattva forms. But once you know who it is you call, don't change your mind. Let it just be that person today. And see that being blazing in light. As though the infinite light of pristine awareness simply took form in front of you. And if you have words, speak your own personal promise. It may have been clear to you in our last meditation of the Fourfold Vision Quest, what you wish to become. Can you promise that? Looking upon this sacred being, knowing you are heard. Let the promise come in your own words, whatever it may be. And then let your promise transform into reverence as your inner being prostrates. Let your reverence turn into offering as you realize that everything good you have ultimately comes from your sacred, pure source, and return it to that source, symbolized by this teacher. Make your own personal highest offering. And then not even thinking of deeds, just look inside at what your greatest veil is, the thickest veil over your being right now. And ask for guidance how that might be removed, little by little. And then take joy, recognizing how very much goodness there is around us. If only we're willing to look utterly free of jealousy or competition. Just joy at the virtue of others. And then look into the eyes of your teacher and beg them from the depth of your heart to guide you, to stay close to you, to teach you, to manifest for you in forms you can see and hear, relate to, learn from. And then call on your teacher to bless your mind stream, to pour the energy into your mind stream that it may evolve to the place that it no longer identifies itself as a sentient being. And see this sacred being of light and rise and hover above the crown of your head, facing the same way as you. And becoming smaller, more intense, brighter, clearer. And check, is the being you have visualized, whom you've called to yourself, do you view this being as someone to whom you could give your whole heart, your whole existence? If you hesitate, then go deeper. Go to the enlightened Buddha. If you hesitate, it means there are some surface projections that are stopping you from engaging the Guru, the true Guru, who can only be the enlightened Dharmakaya. But when you know it is a pure manifestation of pristine awareness hovering above your head, then ask this manifestation, this being, to enter you, to suffuse you, to transform you. To let you become what that being is. And so see the figure of light descend through your central channel and come to rest inside the orb of light at your heart. Making it so obvious to your mind, this is pristine awareness. Your pristine awareness. Let the visualization remain present long enough that you can feel the center of gravity, the weightedness in your heart. You can feel your mind and your energies resting there, totally satisfied by the presence of your Guru. Let that light then fill you, streams of brilliant white light emerging from the indestructible Bindu, filling your entire form, irradiating any obstacles, any pain, any tightness. as though in this moment you were achieving shamatha. As though you could feel the bliss of pliancy in your body and your mind. And right now, rather than analysis, rather than seeking out the true origin, location, or destination of our own mind, which is for another time, just surrender, utter surrender to the divine presence within you. Giving away your mind, giving away your body. Letting go all the traces of striving, wishing for something different, trying to fix your mind, fix your meditation, fix your world. Let it go. And rest in utter inactivity. Letting stillness be still. The fizz and froth of the conceptual mind may continue, but just don't engage with it. And if your eyes were still closed, very gently let them be open. So that your body is light, your senses are light. You're not closing anything out, but you're not engaging with it either. Keep dwelling in the stillness that is your Guru, that is your pristine awareness, that cannot ever be moved. Let appearances be gossamer, transparent. You're not holding on to anything, not thinking there's anything behind, really there. Don't try to fix anything. don't be distracted by anything either. Simply dwell. So as you move or return to your seat, try to hold that stillness in your heart. Begin practicing the stillness in the midst of motion in the post-meditative state right now. This minute is extremely important to set a seed for when you leave this room, for when you leave your home. After meditation, then you go to do whatever you need to do to carry that stillness. And with practice, it becomes the baseline. That's the word I'm looking for. It's the baseline for who you are, that you're just at peace, resting in stillness. And the world can be the world, and people can be what they are. But when you're always tapping into that, and you have so deeply associated, as I was saying before about how a Shamatha retreat can become constant prayer, so likewise, if your stillness in the midst of motion is so deeply associated with your devotion to the highest guru, known as Dharmakaya, known as the Buddha himself, herself. Of course, gender is irrelevant there. Then whenever you recall your stillness in the midst of motion, you're recalling the Buddha. And when you're recalling the Buddha, then you're recalling your wish to care for every living being at the deepest level. And when you're recalling your wish to care for every being at the deepest level, then you will know how to respond. You see? I think that's all. It's been such a tremendous privilege to see all of your beautiful faces. I think you can imagine when one's in solitude a great deal, and practicing, attempting to practice all of these extraordinary teachings, the yearning to engage with real faces, individuals. It just comes. It comes very naturally. And so I feel like you have all manifested out of my heart's prayer and retreat. And so I thank you. And please know that I take you back into retreat with me. Whether I've had the opportunity to meet you or know your name, or I know you're here, I embrace you all and I take you into retreat. And we practice in union. And I mean that. I really feel that the reverberations of practice, just because all of us have been together in this retreat, then we go to our separate places. And if we can hold that kind of view, then all of our practice will help each other. So, peace be with you. Thank you.